Welcome back to another episode of Cory and Jan doing beer exploration as father and son. Today we have Frank Boon or Bone Kriek Mariage Parfait or Mariage Parfait. This is not a language that either of us are overly familiar with. This beer is 8% ABV, which is rather high for this style. Something we noticed as we were pouring it out is there was actual sediment on the bottom, which is not common for this style, but a little bit exciting for us because it means there's a lot that's going on in the bottle conditioning and the refermentation that's occurring in the bottle. I'm going to let my dad talk a little bit more about this since he was the one who introduced me to Bone products. They weren't available widely in Colorado for a few years, and it's only been until recently since I've been able to experience them. However, you've been on to Frank Boon for quite a long time. You've been talking about Mariage Parfait for probably 20 or 30 years.
Well, I don't like to talk about beers of mystery, but since Frank Boon didn't really import his beers for quite a while, and they were very sporadically available in the United States. And when we lived back in Illinois, we were actually able to get to some places that had some of their products, and probably their flagship product is Mariage Parfait. This one actually is Mariage Parfait with Kriek or cherry added to the brewery. So this is going to be quite an experience, I think, for us.
Sorry for adjusting the video. I'm hoping so, and most of these beers we try to not really get our hopes up too much, but I've had only a handful of Boon products, so I'm kind of excited about it. I'm okay to say that.
It's a beautiful, deep, almost mahogany cherry color. It is really quite attractive.
And it's not very opaque. It's barely see-through at all. In fact, it's very murky and substantive as far as what is inside of our glasses.
You mean it's actually quite opaque? It's not very translucent.
Right, that's what I meant.
Right.
It's not see-through at all. You're getting definitely some sourness, a little bit of mustiness, because this is a 2014 beer. We assume that the oak fermentation and aging process is between 1 and 2 years. So once again, we're drinking a beer that is between 7 and 7.5 years old. So you're getting some mustiness in the nose. Are you getting that as well?
I am getting that, but it's not an unpleasant mustiness.
Mm-mm. You're getting very strong oak. And the cherry is there. It grows stronger if your nose would have a palate. The smell goes stronger the longer you sniff it with the cherry.
Well, let's dive in.
Wow. I already snuck a sip. I had the same reaction the first one as I did the second one. That's not what I was expecting. Before I elaborate on it, I want you to talk about what you just tasted.
I think this beer may be a little bit too old.
I was hoping you'd say that because that's what I was thinking. Talking about the positive things that I encountered first was the spiciness that you don't get in other cherry beers of this style. There's sort of like a real deep, dark cherry spice note going on that's not like what you're getting in most Krieks. Most Krieks are more sweet than this and more grenadine-ish. This has a very pure cherry flavor going on.
Yes, it's brewed with quite a large amount of cherries in the mash, and it's actually very well integrated for this style of beer. Sometimes when you get a Kriek, there seems to be a kind of layering of flavors. This one seems to be actually quite integrated, but I think it's just maybe a little bit beyond its peak.
The reason why I would agree with you, Dad, in terms of what I'm experiencing in flavor is, one, I don't think I've ever had vinegar sourness in a Boon product before.
No.
And that is present here. Not so much as the Jacobin that we just had. But I didn't expect that. I expected this to be more sweet.
I did too. Especially because it's very, very cherry, but the sweetness of the cherries is quite subdued.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if the older this gets, if the yeast consume that cherry sweetness that's from the fruit, and don't take it away, but dilute it in terms of its presence in the flavor profile of this beer.
Yes, I think that's probably what's going on. In our experience with probably one of the most transcendent beer experiences we ever had was with the, what was it called?
Straf Hendrik.
Straf Hendrik, which was actually 8 years old, but it was a quad, which is a much sweeter and a much denser kind of a beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that Flemish ale styles don't really age as well as that quad beer that we drank, that Straf.
I think, at least in a matter of opinion, we might like them at 2 or 3 years rather than 5, 6, 7, or even 8 years. And I think that there definitely could be once again an appetite for this type of aging process. Anything in oak and re-fermentation in the bottle does age really well. I think I have a limitation on when a beer stops becoming complex and starts becoming dominantly more one thing than the other, which in this case is sort of a sourness. Now, that's not to say that on its own, compared to other beers, this is a fantastic beer as it is right now. I'm not just to say fantastic, but I think it's a very, very good, pleasurable, unique, complex beer. I just think it'd be a lot better if it was 3 years old.
I think it's wearing pretty well, though, as we drink down through the glass, don't you?
Yeah, it's not becoming more obnoxious. And one of the things that we've experienced, I'm glad you said that, Dad, because other beers that we've had that we weren't sure about, kind of a little bit how we were about this when we first started drinking it, they tend to prove a negativeness and unsurety. They become less pleasurable the further you work through the glass. And that's not what's happening with this beer. You're starting to become used to its oddities.
Well, I have a category of beer that I call deal with it beer. Some of my favorite beers are deal with it beer. For example, what's the name of that Christmas beer I like that's Scaldus. Scaldus Christmas beer is about
13%, 13.5%.
13%.
I like Scaldus Pash.
And when I drink Scaldus Christmas beer, I'm aware that I'm going to have to approach it from the standpoint that there's so much going on that I'm going to have to kind of gear up to drink it, but I actually like it.
Sort of like, like a football player kind of smacking himself in the helmet before going out in the tunnel.
To gear himself up, but then when he's actually out on the field, he does really well.
You gotta be composed, pumped up, but composed.
Yes.
I'm excited to have one of these episodes where we try that beer. I think I've only had Scaldus once, and that was like 15 years ago, and I couldn't deal with it. I was not dealing with it, deal with it.
Well, that's because you don't generally like quads anyway, and that was like a quad on steroids.
Mm-hmm. By the way, kids, don't do steroids. Don't be A-Rod. Or Ryan Braun.
Or Roger Clemens.
Or, yeah, Barry.
Or Sammy.
Well, he corked, too.
Sammy Simpson.
Not only did he do steroids, but he also used corked gas. And he changed his skin pigmentation to white. That was kind of tragic and scary.
So don't do steroids.
Yeah.
It's just an expression.
Or change your skin pigment. Either one or the other. But I would say do drink Frank Boon. And
perhaps
as an experiment.
Not quite 8 years old, but maybe 3 or 4 years old.
Right. I think 3 or 4 is probably the perfect age. We'll do a follow-up on this with Boon if we can find a 3 or 4-year-old Kriek Parfait. And we'll kind of compare it to this other episode and tell you how it is.
That'd be good. Signing off on this one.
Thanks for watching.